Friends, welcome to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me. And we're starting. I suddenly had a splitting headache, a rapid burning pain immediately behind the eyes, spreading rapidly and rapidly intensifying. It hurt so much. My vision blurred and my eyes hurt as I sat at my desk, staring at my laptop, but unable to focus on it. God, I was so thirsty. My mouth was so dry. Some parts of me were numb, but I couldn't tell which ones. My face, my hand. I wasn't sure. I reached for the beer but missed and knocked it over. I couldn't figure it out. It was pointless. And then everything made perfect sense. I could feel my brain functions slipping away one by one. I was as sure of it as I was of my own name, Jason Black. Often life, being a cruel fool, serves us sandwiches for lunch, and this fool manages to deceive us so that we always take a bite. Sometimes you get lucky and you are content with just a small piece, and sometimes you eat the whole damn thing and then spend years puking it out of your system. At that moment, I realized that I had just eaten a whole special Dagwood. In an instant, there was a sharp, intense, searing white pain. I rushed forward, threw up and fell before everything calmed down and turned into blackness. There's nothing special about me. I am slightly above average in appearance and intelligence and slightly below average in patience and social skills. I have never been a Navy SEAL or a black belt holder in any martial art. My short temper and above-average intelligence, but below the level of genius, meant that as a child I was involved in fistfights. I was too smart to put up with all sorts of shit, but not smart enough to walk away from it. I've never been on the honors list. I've never started my own company, won the lottery, worked for the mafia, or opened a secret bank account in the Caymans. I've never stood out in anything. Never. I married a woman who, like me, wasn't anything special. Katie is attractive, smart, and mostly caring. She is not a walking wet dream, not an outright flirt, and not a cheater. She was attractive enough to me in all the ways that I considered important. We met, got married, and had a son. We had our share of ups and downs, but mostly the scales were balanced. We worked and saved, quarreled and forgave, raised our son. We have experienced balance and chaos equally, as only a long devoted couple can do. Sometimes we fought for a good reason, and sometimes because one of us was stupid, selfish, or just stubborn. Sometimes we'd fight and find a solution. Often we'd fight and just agree to disagree, only to fight again one day, and again. I smoke and drink too much, and Katie is a bit self-centered and a model of passive aggression. Katie claims that her passive aggression is the result of my smoking and drinking, and I claim that I drink and smoke because she is so damn passive-aggressive. Round and round, over and over, but somehow it all worked. Somehow we got along, loved each other, and focused on our son, our relationship, and each other. We were happy. None of us did sports regularly, but we were always active and fit enough. We have always tried to eat right, but we have never denied ourselves pizza, worrying about saturated fats, just in moderation. No one was ever going to write a love story about us. We were in love with each other, but not obsessed with each other. There was never a fire in our bedroom. We did what we liked as often as we liked to do it, no more and no less. At the beginning of our marriage, we made love probably 2, 3 times a week, but we never had marathon runs. Neither of us had much experience before we met, but neither of us was a virgin. The number of her previous partners was slightly higher than mine, but it never bothered me. I've never had a problem attracting women, but I was picky about who I shared my bed with. It's strange for a young man, I know, but that's the way I'm built. I had to get carried away with her in order to go to bed with her. So the fact that my figure was not higher was a choice, not circumstances. As I said, Katie wasn't a cheater, so her slightly higher figure just didn't matter. We suited each other well, enjoyed each other, and neither of us felt left out. Katie had a very difficult pregnancy and childbirth with our son John. He was born weighing just over 10 pounds. After that, love brought some pain, but we coped. After 28 years of marriage, we still made love, but no more than 2, 3 times a month. Katie was as much an initiator of love as I was, and we rarely refused each other when we were approached, so I'm sure we had as much love as each of us wanted. We have always been affectionate with each other, and it has never weakened. We still often held hands in public or hugged while watching a movie. We had a lot in common, and there are many differences. We shared the same values and goals, enjoyed the same music, and although we both enjoyed reading, we never read the same books. Katie hated TV. She rarely had the patience to sit through the whole movie, and often we had a hard time finding something that we both liked. She loved cooking, and although I hated cooking, I didn't mind cleaning. We both loved camping and hiking, but if Katie liked bird watching, then I wanted to fish or go hiking. We were similar where it mattered, and our differences allowed us to express our individuality. It worked. Since becoming parents, we have both changed for the better. When our son was born, I got patient and started working on developing social skills, and Katie became a little less self-centered and tried to be less passive-aggressive when it came to our son. John and I joined the Scouts, and Katie joined the PTA. We all attended church together and made sure that John was always active, happy, and loved. Katie was a disciplinarian, and I gave balanced instructions. We taught John hard work and honesty, empathy and dedication, hope and faith in himself and God, and we were proud of the results. We weren't perfect, but it seemed like we were functioning perfectly together. "Mr. Black, can you hear me? Mr. Black?" I slowly scanned the room for a voice, trying to lick my dry lips. Where have I been? What the hell is going on? My unfocused gaze stopped on something or someone to my right. "Mr. Black, my name is Dr. Taylor. Do you know where you are?" I mumbled back. There was a pause. "Mr. Black, you suffered a stroke. Hemorrhagic stroke. You are in the Presbyterian Hospital, do you understand?" "Graymont. Why is that?" I nodded in understanding. "Good. Don't worry about your speech, Mr. Black. It looks like you are suffering from aphasia as a result of a stroke. The right side of your face is damaged. There is a slight omission. At the moment, we cannot determine if you have other injuries, whether aphasia is a result of brain damage or muscle damage to the face. When you get a little stronger, we will be able to determine the extent and nature of your disorders and make a more complete diagnosis and prognosis. You seem to be able to understand me, so I hope so." The doctor talked for a few more minutes about the operation I underwent to isolate and stop the cerebral hemorrhage, which, in his opinion, was the cause of my stroke. I tried to focus my eyes on him. I was trying to make sense of what he was telling me. I tried, but I just fell into a deep sleep. A few days later, I woke up to find my son John sitting next to me in the hospital room. I still couldn't focus my eyes to make him out clearly, but I knew it was John. Dad just knows. When he noticed that I was looking at him, he took my hand, sniffed, and tried to squeeze out a few words. "Dad, His voice sounded tired, defeated. I just nodded, squeezed his hand, and looked away. What could be said? The only people I saw were my boss, 2 colleagues, and the hospital staff. 3 days later, John and I were in a Mexican standoff and glared at each other for several minutes. I was unhappy that he was here, and he was unhappy with a lot of things. "Dad, you're going home tomorrow. How the hell are you going to cope alone? Without a doubt, I will be there to help you. You can't drive a car, you can barely walk. What's your plan?" He was waiting for my decision. "John, I love you. I appreciate you and appreciate your concern. But you just started a new job and you don't have to take time off to help me. I'll be fine." Of course, it didn't sound like that at all. I had progressed in the development of my speech, but it was still slow, labored, heavily slurred, and often barely exceeded mumbling. John was one of the few people, apart from the hospital staff, who could make sense of my mumbling. "It's out of the question, Dad, because Mom..." He let the thought die on his tongue. "You can't be alone, at least not for long. Who the hell else is going to help you?" My boss was sympathetic to this, so stop worrying. I can stay with you, work in the office for a few hours less when I need to accompany you, and earn the rest of the time by working remotely from home. Everything's going to be great. The prognosis was good. In addition to aphasia, I had partial paralysis of my right arm and leg. With a little physical therapy and speech therapy, blood thinners and lifestyle changes, I will be able to restore most of the functions of my leg and arm, as well as significantly reduce the drooping of my face. Dr. Taylor thinks that I will limp slightly, and the droop of my face will be barely noticeable. Fortunately for me, aphasia seemed to be directly related to damage to the muscles of the face and mouth. "All right, John. Thanks," I muttered, sniffing. "I love you, Dad." I was returning home, or what was left of it. "I love you too, John." There were no warning signs. I didn't know that I was about to lose my wife, and she didn't give me any clues. We had been married for a little over 25 years when this happened. Katie worked as a director of a nonprofit organization, and I was a sales director in North America, in the division of a large international software company. I know. What is a guy with poor social skills doing in the sales department? The truth is, the worst salesmen are guys with a gift for talking. They just don't know how to listen. If you want to sell a sophisticated software solution to a Fortune 500 company, you need to be able to listen. The heads of these large companies do not want to be your friends, but they must trust you and respect you professionally. They may want to have a beer or play a round of golf with the chatterboxes, but they prefer to work on their business issues with the listeners. I was making great money, and although I was good at what I did, I was always a great salesman. I was never outstanding, never one of the few guys who earned 7-digit commissions. But I have always met or exceeded the quota, regardless of the economy, and my stable job has earned me my current position and the respect of many colleagues in the past and present. I wasn't picky with my team, but I expected you to meet the quota most of the time. I've worked with my representatives to help them do this, and in all the years that I've been in charge of sales, I've only had to fire a few people for performance issues. I would say, and regularly said, that these were hiring mistakes, which often happens in a growing economy, when you have to soften your standards a little to fill open vacancies. I have always opposed such hiring, but senior management has often pushed me to do so. So representatives can create a lot of new businesses while supporting existing customers. But let's face it, some guys are great hunters, while others are great at farming. The management solved this problem by dividing the territories. I always thought it was short-sighted and lazy. I wanted to separate these two directions. Let the hunters hunt, and the farmers do the farming. For years, I've been told that it's impossible, unprofitable, and unwise, but that all changed when we switched to the SaaS, Software as a Service, delivery model. Our licensing switched to subscription, and suddenly farming became of great importance. I was finally able to unleash my hunters and put the farmers on a fertile pasture. At first, some hunters did not like the idea of giving up the low-hanging fruit in the form of subscription renewal, but eventually they realized that they were getting more pleasure from their work, and with properly adjusted quotas, they still pulled 250,000 according to plan. As a result, everyone became happier. I spend most of my time solving other people's problems. I like it. I liked solving the problems of my representatives, our clients, and my company. I could almost always find a mutually acceptable solution, and that made my job enjoyable. However, there was a lot of stress. You still need to meet your targets. You can't rest on your laurels in sales. You're only good in the last quarter, which means you're constantly on the move. I've traveled a lot. Every week I was somewhere on the road, sometimes for a night, sometimes for a whole week. It is exhausting, has a hard effect on personal relationships, physical and mental health. Hobbies helped me deal with stress, and Katie was fully supportive of my career, which also helped reduce the stress I might feel worrying about the state of my home life. I tried like hell to be available to her and John every weekend, and mostly I succeeded. I held sales meetings, conference call, in the middle of the week, which was a bit unusual, but I wanted the beginning of the week to be free, so that we could react to everything that happened over the weekend, and so that my representatives had at least a little time to act on any suggestions or corporate directives that we reviewed during the sales meeting. It worked. Sitting in my office and looking through the mail on Wednesday afternoon, right after the weekly sales meeting, I picked up an ordinary white envelope with a Dallas postmark and no return address. It was as unremarkable as anything else, but opening this envelope changed my life, setting it on a new, dangerous path from which I will never be able to fully recover. Oh, Katie. Peter Sellers was a happy little guy despite his profession, quite average in appearance and size, which I suppose was an advantage professionally. Our first meeting was short and did not inspire much confidence. He asked a lot of questions that could have been expected, but he also asked a lot of questions that seemed damn inappropriate to me. Some of his comments were downright weird, and he was annoyingly cheerful about everything. Nevertheless, he was highly recommended, and to be honest, I didn't know a damn thing about this kind of work. I answered his questions, asked a few questions in response, gave him some information he wanted, filled out some forms, paid him, and that was it. Give me 2 weeks, Mr. Black. Let's arrange to meet in 2 weeks or earlier, if we can complete everything before that time. Try to get some sleep. You look dead tired and ready to fall. I agreed, muttered something about being tired and someone falling dead, and left. At our second meeting, a little less than 2 weeks later, Peter Sellers did not seem to me such a happy and strange guy. God, what a week it's been. We were so busy in the office that I hardly had time to think. Today I finished my latest project and was looking forward to a hot bath, delicious food, and a quiet evening with my husband Jason. We've both been working a little more than usual lately. Our schedules have been off, and we probably haven't really talked for about 2 weeks. I usually don't have to spend as much time as I have lately, and I can work according to Jason's monstrous schedule. But this project had tight deadlines, and Jason seemed even busier than ever. He told me about delivering something that meant reorganizing something that seemed important. Oh, and a new business model, I don't know what, requiring a new success rate or something like that. Basically, my eyes glazed over a bit when Jason talked about his work. I don't understand technology. For me, it's all so much like Charlie Brown's parents. Wah, 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 wah. Charlie Brown is one of the main characters in the Peanuts comic book series. But damn it, it made him happy. And I loved him, so I tried to listen and understand. I love my husband. I like to support him and be supported by him. I like our life together and our plans for the future. Jason provided us with an excellent standard of living that would allow us to count on an early retirement. We hoped that in the next few years we would have the opportunity to enjoy life. When our son John became independent and our house was paid for, we saved a lot of money. We often just sat with a glass of wine and, for Jason, whiskey, and planned our immediate future. It was all so exciting and accessible that I couldn't help but support Jason, who was working to make it happen. God, I loved my man. I wanted him to quit smoking and drink less. Combined with the stress he was constantly experiencing, I was worried about his health and our future. He always joked that he would quit smoking when I learned to face the problem face to face. I had a habit of avoiding conflict, and I dealt with my anger by being passive with Jason. I used sarcasm, for example, saying just kidding after scolding him, or expressing my anger covertly, not sharing with him, denying love, silently, or enjoying his mistakes if I was right about something. I told you so. Jason hates it. He solves problems and gets down to business immediately as soon as it arises. He never postpones what needs to be resolved and does not shy away from conflicts. On the contrary, he welcomes them as a means of resolution. He says what's on his mind and hopes for the same from me. Of course, he doesn't understand this, but this is already a woman's prerogative. I knew Jason would be home this evening. I wasn't sure exactly when, as he often worked late, but he didn't mention any trips, so I was sure we could enjoy a pleasant evening together. On the way home, I stopped to pick up groceries for dinner and drove the last couple of miles, humming to myself. When I pulled up to the house, I was surprised to see Jason's car in the driveway. I tried to remember the last time he was ahead of me, but I couldn't. Well, more time to relax together and rebuild a relationship. I parked next to Jason, collected the groceries, and headed for the front door. When I entered the foyer, I called out to Jason, but I was greeted by silence. Strange, I thought, putting the grocery bags on the kitchen island and calling him by his name again. But there was still no response. I headed for our bedroom, thinking maybe he was in the shower. His jacket was on the bed, but Jason wasn't there. Walking down the hallway to his home office, I opened the door, and at that moment my whole world collapsed. Speech therapy and physiotherapy procedures were of great benefit. It was only 3 months after the stroke, and I could already walk and talk. Of course, I sounded like that lady Diana on NPR, the blogger at the radio station. But I could speak, albeit with difficulty. John was a constant source of strength and support and helped me push the boundaries of my physical abilities. However, he was unhappy, and I knew that we needed to finally talk about it. It's time for me to be with my son, help him deal with it. John, have you talked to your mother lately? There was a long pause. I liked his mind, and I never rushed him with answers because I knew that they were all well thought out. He didn't open his mouth until he knew what he wanted to say and how. It always drove Katie a little crazy, but I thought it was a strength of character that needed to be admired and encouraged. No, Dad, I didn't talk. She emailed me, but I didn't reply. I don't know if I can. I want to know what happened, but I'm not sure I can forgive her, so she's your mother, John. She loves you. Maybe by talking to her, you can find a way to keep her in your life so that you can come to terms with it. Or maybe not. But if you avoid it, you will only have anger and doubts. And this is the kettle calling the pot black. Jesus, Dad, what if I told you that? John, she married me. She gave birth to you. These are completely different things. Besides, I'm not avoiding her. She knows where I live. For your own sake, try to resolve these issues with her. Let her understand how she offended you. so that at least you feel better. If you keep it to yourself, it will only hurt you. I don't know, Dad. All right, John. Let's talk about it over lunch. Tell me what's on your mind, ask questions, throw tantrums. Let's kick this fucking elephant out of the room. I left him for a while and went out of the room to cook dinner for us. As I mentioned, I hated cooking, so the food these days was always pretty simple, but my new diet required a little work. I made a nice salad and sliced some apples and pears to garnish, as well as grapes and nuts. After a while, John came into the kitchen and sat down at the table opposite me, eyeing his salad suspiciously. After a few moments of careful inspection of his plate, he picked up a slice of pear and took a bite. I'm proud of you, Dad. You really stick to this diet. Another pause and another slow bite of the pear, and then, in a barely audible whisper, What's wrong, Dad? I sighed. It's going to be difficult, but it had to happen. Well, I was in my home office when I had a stroke. Fortunately, your mom found me unconscious shortly after it happened and called 911. I fell silent, looking at the backyard. I know, Dad, but she left before the ambulance arrived. She didn't go to the hospital. She didn't come home, Dad. For God's sake, her husband just had a stroke and she dumped him. When you needed her the most, she left you, Dad. What kind of person does that? John, she did the right thing at that moment. She was the last person I needed then or needed now. She has never dealt with conflicts, so her reaction doesn't surprise me. Shit, Dad, you have a stroke and you need medical help. This is hardly a crisis that she should run from. Conflict, John, not a crisis. Your mom couldn't handle the impending conflict. When she found me at the table, lying unconscious in my own vomit, she realized that the biggest conflict in our lives had just clipped my knees and was heading towards her. She couldn't accept this fact. She couldn't accept what she had done. It almost killed me, and she couldn't accept it. Couldn't put up with what, Dad? What did she do that could be worse than leaving you like that? Looking into his serious, pleading face, I took a deep breath and then I told him. I opened the door to Jason's home office and stared blankly at the scene in front of me. Oh my God. Jason leaned on the table and lay unconscious in a pool of vomit. I rushed to him and noticed that fortunately he was still breathing, although breathing seemed a little difficult. Now I was crying uncontrollably, screaming for him to wake up. Jason! I shook him, but he refused to wake up. I shifted his head so that he wasn't lying in his own porridge, sobbing and screaming all the while and starting to hyperventilate. Jason! I kept shaking him. I knew that stress, his smoking and drinking would be his undoing. I was so mad at him. Damn you, Jason, wake up! I hit him on the shoulder, screaming and crying. I hugged him. Jason, please. Then I looked up at his laptop and froze. No, it can't be. Jason, my rock, the man I love, collapsed after watching a video of me, like an animal, mating in a cheap motel room with my colleague Chris Peters. I did it to him. My head was spinning. There was a loud buzzing in my ears. I stood there, frozen, watching and listening to my betrayal. My selfish, stupid betrayal. A betrayal that seems to have almost killed my husband. I do not know exactly how long I stood there. But I know that most of all I am ashamed of what I did next. Instead of dialing 911 and calling for help for my husband, who was quite possibly dying, I took the DVD out of his laptop and searched his office for further clues. I found the report of the investigator, Mr. Sellers, and taking both the report and the DVD from the room, hurried down the corridor. I ran into our bedroom and hurriedly packed my suitcase, throwing the DVD and the private investigator's report into it. After carrying the suitcase downstairs and putting it in the trunk of my car, I went to the kitchen, took out the grocery bags and put them in the car. I can't explain why. Back at the house, I poured myself a drink to calm my nerves. It wasn't until I finished my drink that I finally called 911 to ask for help for my husband. Who does that? I gave my name and address, answered a few questions about his condition, then turned off the bell, rushed to the car, left the front door open, and drove away. I couldn't accept it. When I just returned home from the hospital after a stroke, it became clear that Katie had been to the house and picked up her things. It seems that she spent a lot of time going through everything. She took photos, DVDs, CDs, art objects, kitchen utensils, her cookbooks, etc. Even the furniture was gone. It was clear that she had moved out. John had a stroke. I didn't care. John wanted to wring her neck. I wanted to lie down. Over the next few months, as I went through the agony and humiliation of physical and speech therapy, I reflected on what had brought us here. I haven't heard anything about Katie. John and I never talked about her, and I didn't know if he was in touch with her or not. I hoped for his sake, but on the whole, I didn't care. I found that, unlike what people say, you can absolutely just stop loving someone. More precisely, I unconditionally and immediately realized that I do not love the woman I am married to now. I still loved the woman I married 25 years ago, but she left and someone I didn't know took her place. I didn't hate her, and how could I? I didn't even know her. No, I was simply and completely indifferent to her. She was just John's mother. I was glad that she didn't stay in the house, that her inability to confront conflicts or the consequences of her actions made her run away. Otherwise, it would be hard. Who wants to chat with a complete stranger while they are recovering from a serious illness? Certainly not me. No, it was for the best. I haven't decided when I'm going to do my marriage yet. When Mr. Sellers first contacted me and informed me that she was really cheating on me, I took the appropriate steps, confident in the correctness of my actions and the need to act immediately. I have already contacted a lawyer who instructed me on the necessary and permissible actions before filing a lawsuit, and I have started this process. I asked Mr. Sellers to send copies of his report, DVD, etc. To my lawyer, began to separate our finances as much as possible, and began to remove Katie from among my beneficiaries in everything I could think of. Meanwhile, my lawyer was preparing the necessary documents for the start of the divorce process. Of course, everything went to pieces even before the paperwork was filed and Katie was served. I met with Sellers, took my copy of his report and the accompanying photos and DVDs, and went home to look through it all. The realization that your wife is cheating and the fact that you see her cheating have completely different consequences for your well-being. We all know that children are dying in war zones, and this deeply affects us. But seeing children die in a war zone will have a completely different impact. Few people survive it unscathed. Contemplating Katie's betrayal almost killed me and left me humiliated. Yes, I will divorce Katie. I was sure of that. The reconciliation seemed completely ridiculous. I mean, does no one ever consciously decide to marry someone who they know will cheat on them? So why stay married to the same thing? The only thing I knew about this Katie was that she was a cheater and a coward. Oh, and John's mother. Otherwise, she was a complete stranger. No, I wasn't going to make the decision to grow old with a cowardly cheater. Divorce was my only option, but at the moment, I had more important things to do. I needed to recover and decide what I would do for myself next. I still had to make some physical progress, and I had to decide whether I would return to my stress-filled corporate life or choose another direction. I was hoping to work for another 4-5 years and then retire. Perhaps I could afford to retire now, albeit with less comfort than I had hoped. Perhaps I can start a new career or reconsider my position at the company to reduce stress and travel. I still didn't know. I began to eat better, quit smoking and drinking, although the doctor told me that a stack or two from time to time would not be superfluous if and when I could give up my current medications. I didn't miss drinking or smoking. The experience of near death will do this to you. Physical therapy was a good exercise, and I was walking quite a lot now too. No, the only thing I knew for sure was that I would not let Katie's infidelity change or destroy me. Instead, I decided that I would use it and its consequences as the motivation I needed to become healthy and happy. It's been 3 years since that day, the day I found my husband Jason dying because of my selfish stupidity. I haven't spoken to Jason or John since. John refuses to talk to me, and I'm too ashamed to try to contact Jason. In the end, he filed for divorce and served me at work. I didn't resist the divorce, and we basically split everything equally, albeit slightly in favor of Jason. What did I care about that? After all, Jason threatened the organization I worked for with very bad publicity if they didn't take certain actions. Negotiations dragged on, and eventually Chris Peters was fired, and the executive director, my boss, was reprimanded. My career in this organization has stalled. During this process, it turned out that Chris was the one who warned Jason about our affair. Chris and his wife had an open marriage, which caused them to drift apart over the years. We joked that we were married at work. He is my husband at work, and I am his wife at work. I never considered this little game dangerous and did not respect the appropriate boundaries. Shortly after the beginning of our physical affair, my boss found us together in my office, and we were officially reprimanded. In a subsequent letter to me, she pointed out that office affairs, especially between married employees, are strictly contrary to our code of ethics, and as my boss, she should have reprimanded us and advised us to stop the affair. And as my friend, she didn't understand why I wanted to cheat on Jason with Chris, but she understood the appeal of the affair, and if I want to continue, please keep him out of the office. That's what we did. It should have been enough to bring me to my senses, but it didn't happen. I didn't like Chris, but I liked him. He wasn't any better than Jason, just smaller. Yes, less. Since John was born, love with Jason has been associated with a certain amount of pain, and that was the end for me. Chris began to fall in love with me and often talked about leaving our spouses and being together. I immediately closed the subject. I would never leave Jason. I loved him. I told Chris that although I really like him, I don't like him. He wasn't happy at all, and so he hoped that exposing me to Jason would lead to my divorce and hurt me a little for insulting his manhood. He mailed Jason copies of our reprimand and the letter my boss sent me. That got Jason to hire a private investigator, and here we are. Of course, after I found Jason dying and ran away, I couldn't bring myself to continue the affair with Chris, and when I found out that he had revealed our relationship to Jason, I slapped him hard in the face and haven't spoken to him since. I tried to establish a relationship with my son, John, but he refuses to have anything to do with me. He got married about 4 months ago, and I was devastated to find out about it only after the fact. Not only did he not invite me, he didn't even tell me about it. I know that my escape from Jason hurt John very much. I think if it was just about infidelity, he and I would still have communication. It would be strained and, of course, not as close as before, but nevertheless we would communicate. Running away from Jason meant that John wouldn't forgive me. I knew he would never be able to get over it, and that's my biggest regret. Of course, I regret cheating on Jason, and I really dodged a bullet when he was alive. I still can't believe I've been waiting all this time to call 911. I still have sleepless nights when I think about it. No, my inability to acknowledge what I had done and what it had done to Jason ended my relationship with my son. Jason probably expected no less. He knew me well, as good as I am him. I knew that my infidelity would end our marriage. I knew Jason couldn't stand it. Oh, he's not an ass. If it was a drunken one-night stand, he'd probably put up with it. It would seriously undermine his faith and trust in me, but it would not destroy our marriage. But a 14-month-long affair? No, there was no going back after that. Jason knew it. I knew it. It was over between us. And not only did I ruin our marriage, those same actions almost killed the man I loved. If that wasn't enough, my delay in calling 911 could have completed the job that my infidelity didn't finish. After that, I just didn't have the opportunity to meet with Jason, but I didn't try. I'm watching him, well, as I can. He seems to have mostly recovered from the stroke and quit his job. Apparently, after selling our house, he bought an auto trailer and spends his time traveling between state and national parks, working as a kind of park ambassador in exchange for some cash and housing, a place and connection for his trailer. I think he's finally given up smoking and drinking. His stressful job is gone, and he's traveling around the country enjoying all the natural beauty that this country has to offer. God, I wish I could be with him. I'm happy for Jason. I miss him and my son John terribly. I still hope that John and I will be reunited one day, but I pray that Jason will never have to see me again. I owe him at least that much.